Now I have a little more vocabulary for you. Um, so why have corporations? Well, I explained to you why you would why the shareholders in a corporation might want to have a corporation, but why would you choose as an entrepreneur to start one? Well, one big reason is that they act as a way of raising massive amounts of funds. If you have a small business idea, you can probably fund it off of loans. You go to the bank, you tell the bank how it's always been your dream to operate your own diner. You would just die of happiness if Guy Fieri came to Clemson and patronized your diner. You've dreamed of it ever since you were a little kid. Well, that kind of thing, you might get a small business loan. If you want to start some massive chemical conglomerate, that's going to be a little harder because what if you fail? The bank's going to be out a lot more than if the bank just paid for, your little mom and pop operation. And so what corporations can do is they can what the proprietors who own a corporation can do is they will incorporate and then sell off stock in order to raise funds to start the corporation. Now, whenever a corporation first sells its stock, that's called an initial public offering. By default, the people that founded the corporation own the corporation. So when they go public, when they hold an IPO, that's when they throw open their doors and tell the public, have at it. You know, I want to let some partners in on my business. Well, of course, they don't want to give up the future profits, but the idea is that it can be worth it if it means that they can grow the business right now. They'll use this to raise initial funds. Another reason why corporations hold IPOs sometimes is that it can also be a way for the owner to cash out. The owner may just be tired of it. They don't want the responsibility of running the company forever, or they may be bored of it. A lot of entrepreneurs are very energetic, restless people. I want you to understand, rich people like that are genuinely hardworking. There is such a thing as the idle rich. There are heirs and heiresses. There are these, there are a lot of useless people in the world, but those people, for the most part, are coasting off of the fortune of someone who was hardworking. CEOs work much longer hours than your average American because these people live to work. They don't even enjoy their money. They honestly, they enjoy suffering. They enjoy endless toil and accumulation for its own sake. It's like a mental disorder. But yeah, some of them they'll build up a nice little company and then they'll sell it off just so that they can free up their time to go do other stuff. And there's two kinds of entities that make their money on IPOs. So one of them is what's called an investment bank, because you have all kinds of different types of bank. And the investment banks specifically exist to make money on IPOs and loans to entrepreneurs. And then you have the smaller version of it, the venture capitalist. So venture capitalists are individuals who cruise around looking for IPOs. They're not entrepreneurs in their own right. They're not the ideas guy or the man of action who's actually going to start the business. They're the money man. They go around shaking hands with entrepreneurs looking for IPOs that they would like to buy into. Well, they are entrepreneurs, but they're of a different sort. They're not the heroic inventor type who has some idea that's going to change the world, but they're they're the uncle with a sack of cash under his mattress who's willing to, help that heroic inventor type get started. I used a quaint example, right? Most of these people are not like uncles saving their money under their mattress. But the heroism of it can also, sometimes be twisted into something ugly. And this leads us to the corporate raider. Okay, well, remember how I said that corporations are shareholders republics? Well, they have politics too, because people don't always agree. And when a group of outsiders buys up shares to try to coup the board of directors, force another election, get the current board sacked, get themselves in, that's called a hostile takeover. Despite the name, they're not inherently bad. In fact, it's very judgmental to call them hostile. They're hostile to the current board, but you know, it's a free election. Imagine if we considered it to be hostile anytime a candidate wanted to run against the sitting president. That'd be absurd. What's a little sketchier is sometimes corporations have assets worth more than their own business model. It could be that they're just mismanaged. The management are morons, they're idiots, they don't know what they're doing. Or it could be that they have some kind of sentimental or moral value for certain businesses, and that keeps them from shutting them down when they would otherwise deserve it. I told you way back at the start of the semester, economics does not assume that people only care about money. Oftentimes, entrepreneurs care a great deal about their product for its own sake. They have some, whether it's an invention, a recipe, a line of work, there's something that they are invested in, that they are just absolutely passionate about, and they want to get it into as many people's hands as possible. And you've also got paternalistic types who really care about their workers. I could give you all kinds of names of men like that. Colonel Sanders had a real passion for his business. He really, really cared about the quality of his food as a matter of personal pride. And he hated it when he sold out and the corporation later, changed the recipe and changed the cooking methods without his consent. It wasn't his decision to make at that point. He'd sold the business, but he just ranted and ranted about it to the point where they eventually had like a sort of like this restraining order, this gag order that he couldn't, as long as he was going to be their spokesman, he couldn't trash talk them anymore. Milton Hershey, creator of Hershey's chocolate bars, he cared a ton about his employees. He built them this paradise, Hershey, Pennsylvania, gave them indoor plumbing and electricity at a time when that was uncommon, gave them schools and like YMCAs and stuff. And it wasn't really to maximize the profit. It was because Hershey had a dream of creating a workers' utopia run by himself. God complexes can sometimes be good. The problem is, there's nothing in economics that says that that's irrational. It's just that these people have benefits that are non-pecuniary. They have benefits to, a certain line of work, that to a certain production method that can't be, well, that can be measured in dollars, but that isn't paid in dollars. Not everyone thinks that way. And so the corporate raider, greedy little asshole, he will set his eyes on a company that is not operating at maximum efficiency. He'll do a little calculation. He'll say, oh, this machinery, this land, this factory could make more money if we just sold it, because there's someone else that is willing to buy it up and use it efficiently. Ah, when a company does this to itself, when a company shuts down either a part of itself or the entire company so that it can sell everything off, we call that liquidation. A corporation can kill itself. It can choose to liquidate all of its property and then just kind of like declare itself over. They don't usually do that, but it happens sometimes. Well, a corporate raid is going to be a specific kind of hostile takeover that has the goal of liquidating a part of or an entire corporation. I see some way that I can make more money off of your business than you are. Oh, you now, and again, it could be that the management are bad at their jobs, or it could be that the management likes the way they run the company. They choose for their own reasons to run the company in a way that makes less profit because it makes more economic profit for them. It includes the good feels of doing something nice for other people. Corporate raider doesn't care. He's going to come in, he's going to shut down the plant, sell off the machines. Your jobs, fuck them. And, you know, they then move on to the next company. They don't stick around. They don't build the company up. They take it over. They, by buying up stock until they have a critical mass of shareholders that are on their side, oust the board, liquidate as much as they can, sell off the stock, and then move on. They're going to pay dividends when they liquidate. And it's legal, but often there are state regulations to give the board of directors advantages. Often they will be able to do things like ask for an injunction to stop a raider from buying up stock, or they'll be able to delay rules that basically favor the incumbent board. And sometimes directors will also resort to corruption to defend themselves too. And this they call greenmail. I honestly I don't know why it's called green, but you'd think blackmail. It's blackmail is what it is. You bribe the raider into leaving you alone. You make him an offer that is big enough that it makes more sense for him to just take the offer and run than to fight it out in the courts, fight it out with, buying up stock and going through that whole mess. After all, there's always the possibility that the corporate raid could fail. The only problem with greenmail is if the board does it with the company's money, a corporation can own stock in itself too. If the board does it with the company's money, then they're not necessarily using their position to maximize shareholder value. They're using it to protect their own jobs. Not good, right? The board are there as representatives of the shareholder. Usually they're shareholders themselves, but they've been elected to run the company on behalf of everybody. Well, the whole idea of the corporate raid is that it's going to maximize value. It's going to pay out big to everyone. And so if they greenmail the raider, they've made their shareholders worse off. And that's wrong. Now, corporate raiders do serve a socially useful function because they free up capital to higher value uses. The whole premise of the raid is that the liquidated asset must be worth more on the market than it is in terms of the value of the stock, right? Somebody else is capable of making more money, making more production with this machine than we are. And so corporate raiding helps to grow an economy. But the downside is that workers lose their jobs. When you downsize, there's no other way around it. You shut down the plant. What are those people going to do? Well, the long-term answer is they're going to go find more jobs. But when we get to Keynesianism, you'll hear his little witticism: in the long run, we're all dead. And sometimes you have towns, especially in rural South Carolina. With you all, it's the cotton mills. Not nowadays, right? But back in the day, you often have these little towns that have one main employer, and the whole town lives or dies based on what happens to that employer. And so a corporate raider can cause a huge amount of disruption in regular folks' lives. And this is a very real moral conundrum. Truth be told, as an economics professor, I'm kind of expected to teach you that the market is generally good, right? I mean, we had our market failures, that's out of the textbook, but otherwise, I'm supposed to shill for the market. But I have very mixed feelings about this because I value stability and community and stuff like that. But we'll come back to this idea later in the semester when we get to Unit 4. Because this trade-off between long-term health of society and the short-term health of the workers is going to be a very powerful theme when we talk about growth, particularly as it relates to technological change. But I strongly recommend, I already mentioned the movie The Big Short. You can watch that on your own if you want. That one, I would recommend getting up through the central banking. Sorry, I would recommend watching the Austrian school video before you watch the movie. But there's another great one on your uh extra credit list called Other People's Money, starring Danny DeVito. And it's about a corporate raid. Honestly, half the reason why I teach this topic is just so that I can show the movie. Because people do have to know what a corporate raid is if they're going to understand what's going on. Good comedy. Danny DeVito is a sleazeball. Okay, well, we kind of got off a little there, but there are a couple other topics I just want to hit with you. One of them is stock market indices, because you do hear about them in the news all the time. What are they? Well, a stock market index is a weighted average of the value of many different stocks. And so, it's like if this company is this big, you're going to give it a higher weight in the average, right? If Procter and Gamble is like 2% of GDP, you'd give them 2%. And you're just taking all the stock values, you're just averaging them together. Bigger companies, more important companies get a bigger weight put on them. Why do we do this? Well, a stock market index is completely meaningless in and of itself. They don't measure anything real. They don't like we don't use them as our measurement for how big an economy is. We use GDP for that, which is your next video. But what they're good for is they give us a sort of snapshot of how the economy is doing at any given moment. You'll learn more about this in the GDP video, but we can't really practically measure GDP below like month to month levels. It's just that the way we do it, we go off of tax receipts, and we just don't have like that granular of data. But with stock markets, those change literally second to second. You can look, I'm sure you can pull that up somewhere online. If you want to know what the stocks were at 10:56 p.m. 30 years ago, you could probably find it. And so individual stocks, firstly, they kind of dance around randomly just from the action of people speculating on them. You have a bunch of people trying to screw each other over and con each other out of money, right? So they do this little like warble. Bigger movements in the stock usually reflect some actual change in the value of the company. But there are so many different companies that something happening to one company doesn't really tell us anything. But if all of the companies move up or all of them go down, There's probably a reason. One thing that's fun to do is go back and look at major world events and see what happens to the stock market. Usually it's bad. It's much more common that you get some like horrific fall from bad news than you get a glorious boom from good news. But we can use it to kind of estimate how, if we need to see right away how businessmen are responding to world events, this is how you're going to do it. If you don't have time to wait for GDP statistics. And there's two big stock market indices you hear about a lot in the US. You have Standard & Poor's 500 or the S&P 500, and it does 500 major companies. This one is kind of like your broader one. And then you got the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which does 30 of the more important companies with more of a focus on fundamentals of the economy. It's not all literally industry, but that's going to be more like your steel and coal and stuff like that. So the S&P 500 is kind of a little more responsive and more holistic of a view. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is more about stuff that actually really matters. The skeleton of the economy.